And now, it's the Finding Your Spine podcast with host Chase Spears.
Welcome back to the Finding Your Spine podcast, where we call you to live and lead boldly in the truth. A lot of the situations that we face when we're trying to make decisions about whether or not to be bold, you don't need a neuroscientist to find out. But as it so happens, I have one in studio today, Dr. Rick Addante. Man, you just flew in all the way from Florida to do this. How cool is that?
That's very cool. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you. It's I've been reading about you. We've been talking a little bit. We even just had to stop because we were having so much fun and all this great stuff was happening. I'm like, we got to get this recorded.
Yeah.
But man, you're just you're an impressive guy. When I was introduced to you and I looked you up, I was like, I don't think this dude's going to talk to me.
Thank you, but that's too kind.
No, and you're it's neat, man. You've got a great story. Rick is a former NASA scientist. He was actually an astronaut program finalist, something I definitely want to dig into because I grew up as a space geek watching the shuttle program. College professor, and what connected us is his role as a whistleblower working to expose the deliberate noncompliance of state officials in Florida who are continuing to push DEI doctrines into higher education and even into governmental agencies. Rick holds a PhD in neuroscience from the University of California at Davis. His groundbreaking research has been published in several of the world's top academic journals. You're also the Young Alum Award winner for all of UC Davis in 2019, a fellow of the Psychonomic Society. You also serve on the board of directors for the Space Coast Discovery Center in Florida, a Father's Heart Combat Sports Mentoring in Oregon, and a cause close to my heart, standing against racism and radicalism and the services STARS. Rick is also the founder of Neurocog Analytics, LLC, and Space Psychology, LLC. Dr. Addante was fired from his tenured position at the Florida Institute of Technology this year for exposing the fact that the president there was trying to fraudulently continue pushing DEI programs not only into the university, but even into the military. And he exposed that, and the university decided to let him go. But he's not taking it laying down. He's fighting back through litigation, and I'm excited to see him doing that and have full confidence in where that's heading. Rick has discussed this in several different venues, including James O'Keefe's show, and is eager to share his warnings with all Americans about the continued work of activists to push DEI doctrines into education, into all echelons of society, and even into our military, which we absolutely cannot have. But he's a man who remains standing in spite of tremendous opposition, and it's my honor to have you here today, and I'm really excited about hearing your story, and I know it's going to be an encouragement to others.
Thank you, Chase. It's an honor to be here.
So, man, you woke up in Florida this morning. You're hanging out with me here in good old rainy Kansas City area today. This is you really believe in this?
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys are doing great stuff. And like I said, it's an honor to be here. Very impressed to see everything that you guys have going on because I'm very much inspired by everything that you guys are doing. So thank you for having me.
It's a joy. It's a privilege. So, this was what I read in your bio is just like a fraction of your accomplishments. I mean, when I was looking through, it's a much longer single-spaced document that tells it all, and there's so much. But I'd love to know you, the person, and let's go back before the tenured professor, the man who has published more stuff than I've written. Who was the kid Rick who decided that one day he was going to actually stand up to a state level institution?
Wow, that's a really great question. So yeah, to unpack that, I guess I was a really big nerd, and I suppose there's always different ways of looking at it, but I guess at different points in my life, I definitely faced a lot of challenge. I had been bullied at times, the normal ways the kids are bullied, other times, rough childhood in the household, dysfunctional parents, abuse, basically grew up at times by a single mom in public housing in Chicago. So when we moved in, we were getting jumped in the neighborhood. I was fighting off the neighborhood kids trying to steal my little brother's bike, and those kind of things, and seeing a lot of unethical and improper things happening growing up in systems, families, it kind of helped me to kind of hone a moral compass, because you kind of learn very early on not just what's right and wrong, but you got to see and experience kind of the vulnerability of needing help, and learn to understand very quickly the impact of what happens when people do and when they don't offer that help to those in need when you're the one in need. Mm-hmm. And so I guess you could say I learned some formative lessons along those ways. I always had a dear admiration for the military. I thought I'd end up in the military. Grew up reading special operations books and all that kind of stuff in the early 90s. Got me into wrestling because, I was reading about this military culture of, pushing yourself as hard as you can, the biggest challenges you can face and find and all that kind of stuff, go beyond what your body thinks is capable. So I thought wrestling was about the closest you could get to that as a junior high school kid. So I got into that and kind of took that not quitting mindset that is kind of embedded into the wrestling ethos, and just it kind of continued. Did that through high school and college. During high school, I switched from Illinois to New Jersey. I think I mentioned a moment ago that I had grown up in a pretty dysfunctional household, both between each of my parents. My mom left when I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, left us with our dad. And then that wasn't a very healthy relationship and household either. We had a lot of abuses of different situations going on. And then at 16, I basically left home, ran away, and found my mom in a different side of the country. Moved in there, started over again, back on the honor roll, and probably within a semester or two in my junior year in high school, captain of the wrestling team, was getting recruited by Princeton, not too long thereafter, and kind of had that motivation at a very early age. That was kind of like a junior college going to college experience for me, because I effectively left home at 16. And so when I went to high school at that point and started training, it was with almost like a professional attitude of like, this is the real world, this is real life, let's make the most of it now that you have a second chance to do really well. And so I was pretty motivated in that respect, took that through college, walked onto the wrestling team at the College of New Jersey, which was one of the best Division III wrestling programs in the country. Got my tail absolutely destroyed every single day. Got crushed as a walk-on Division III guy. So I wasn't very good, but I learned a lot of tenacity, a lot of how to suffer, and a lot of how to have fun and be a good teammate, and learn how to get along with the guys, and that socialization that comes from good camaraderie and learn, frankly, how to be a champion from the guys on my team who were champions, national champions, All-Americans. And it's funny looking back in life, that was a pretty formative experience to get exposure to those kind of peer level and coaching insights. So that's kind of where that came from, and I guess where the journey kind of started and continued towards.
So you were rehearsing this stuff when you were really young. I mean, because I often talk about, when you're in a crisis or when you come through a trial. Now, often people will go through a trial and they'll build character through it. But I find most of the time, most of the people I talk to, like, they had their character intact before they got there. Something had formed that in them. Something had practiced that within them. It sounds like that's very much true in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't really realize that at the time. You don't think about those things necessarily in those moments, especially during your younger days. But looking back over the years, I can definitely, and I have seen that and reflected upon that, because, I coached for a little bit as a wrestling coach in high school and college after I graduated. And so one of the things I like to share to the guys and to when I teach in college and stuff like that was that, you never really know what God's getting you ready for. And a lot of the times the suffering that you might be going through now might really suck. But maybe, and at least in my life, looking backwards, it's always been the case that it turned out that he was getting me ready for the next calling that he had set up. And that next calling might even be a bigger suffering, that I'm going to need those tools that are being honed in the moment of struggle, suffering, some sort of dilemma, whatever that is in our lives that we grapple with or wrestle with, you're getting ready for that next level, whether you've conceptualized that as a video game levels or the levels in life or what have you. And that may not be your battle, by the way, that's coming up next around the bend. It could be somebody else that you're called to help or guide or mentor or teach or give a hand up to, through the understanding and the lessons that you've learned along the way through that process too. So, yeah, I mean, if you look at it in that lens, growing up through those kind of frameworks, you, at least for me, I learned to kind of like understand the impacts of the non-worldly values, because those were the things that really impacted me. The times when people helped and they did the right thing, when I got to hone my faith through trial and tribulation and understand that like the things of this world just don't matter when you're faced against evil or wrongdoing or lies or all the negative things of both this world and the next. And that really shaped my trajectory, you could say, because I always chose, for the most part, not to chase those worldly things. Like much like military people, I didn't pursue a pathway for money. In science, like we don't really make that much money. In education, you don't really make that much money. I did it for the passion and the service of contributing our talents, our time, and our treasure of what my capabilities were academically, scientifically, and pursue those kind of like service-oriented approaches because of a servant leadership model. And I guess I would just kind of end note that entry question by saying it's definitely been a whirlwind lately, because a lot of these conversations we've been having about, the story at Florida Tech and whistleblowing and telling the truth and fighting back about fraud, corruption, abuses in that nature, is kind of new. That's really something that's only happened in the last few months. And so like, it's a weird thing to be defined as a whistleblower, because I've always thought of like being something else, to your original question, a neuroscientist, psychologist, but ultimately these days I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I got a couple little kids, and being a caregiver, being a father, that's really our biggest calling. And that's really what I feel called to do. And that's where we take that forward as a man into our professions, to teach our children how to have professions, but to do that duty as well.
That, where you just ended, that is so important, because our kids have to see us modeling this. Like whether you take something sitting down or whether you take something standing up, whether you yield to evil or whether you stand up to it and you do take the harder right and fight back righteously, not fighting back for the sake of fighting back, but pushing back because it is the right thing to do, because there's a righteousness behind it. Like our kids see that. That makes a dent in their character, like for good or for bad. Like they remember, like mom or dad, they were the ones who did what was right, or they're the ones who were. I mean, I'm thinking this is a silly reference, but Back to the Future.
Yeah.
Right? Like how Marty McFly looks at his dad at the beginning of the movie versus the end of the movie, right?
Well, and his dad's choices, the choices of a father, fundamentally changed the fork in the road for the child.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they did for me. I mean, there were choices that my dad made that set me on a very different path from much of the rest of my family, and for that I'll always be grateful. It's kind of like, I'm sure you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh yeah.
You got that moment where the Frodo and everyone they're running through the caves, and they're being chased by the Balrog and Gandalf. They get to the bridge, and everyone else runs across, and Gandalf literally plants the staff. You shall not pass. And every time I see that, I think that's what a father does. That's what a good father does. Like,
yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned that. I hadn't thought about it in that respect. Usually, I've seen that and thought about represented, in the allegory of Christ or God, like figure in that respect, which Gandalf was also modeling, right? But that's the father. And one of the questions that I've been asked a lot, and that O'Keefe has been kind of like bringing up a lot in our conversations and interviews that we've had of late, is this issue that he hears a lot from people who are scared to tell the truth, scared to come forward, scared to be, bringing the truth into the light. And which is the thing that they say is, well, I have kids, or you don't have kids, James, you don't understand. And that's sort of elicited this response from me that wars aren't fought by childless men. And they're fought by people who have children and those who don't, and both pay an enormous price, and both families pay an enormous price. But, you know, children are not the reason for cowardice. They're the reason for courage. And so that analogy you used of Gandalf and that you shall not pass, right? That's such a good example of that sort of fatherly situation there that James always brings up about, well, what do you do about your kids? How does that govern your decision as a man, as a father, about how to handle a really difficult situation that the price might mean your life. The price might mean you're not there for your children. They need you too. You have a duty to be there and stay alive for them, right? Which military men understand that balance too. You need to come home to them. They need you home, but they need a home to come home to that you provide by defending the country and the nation and our principles. So if you look at that analogy from your Gandalf example, you know, what happened by his sacrifice as that father figure? Well, it allowed every single one of his quote unquote children, that fellowship of friends and brotherhood that emerged, to go on and carry that task and mission forward successfully because of his sacrifice and providence. And they learned a little bit about sacrifice from him, and it inspires them to go forward and be willing to make the same sacrifices too for the rest of their fellowship or family.
Yeah, there's such deep wisdom in that book. I mean, I think after watching the movies, and I will admit that I'm new to reading the books, and you know, whether you're watching the movie or reading the book, they're both rich. Of course, the book is even richer, but I think, man, how much of this was inspired by his own service in the First World War? And obviously, we know a great deal of it was. I mean, he modeled the entire Hobbit character off of the British, you know, privateer, and just as a soldier, as a veteran, I think about these things a lot, because that was my life for 20 years. And I think, what kind of leaders did he have that he walked out of this with? I mean, the World War I was horrible. I mean, the first war in which we had the full array of combat arms, of combined arms warfare, including aviation and precision long-range artillery. And I mean, it was just a hellscape. And yet,
and against the old tactics that weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
Just brutal.
And yet, out of that could come such magnificent reflection, right? That speaks to all areas of life. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go down that.
No, it's all right. So I mean, I know you're a man of faith, and your audience is too. And did you know one of the primary reasons for Tolkien's writing that story?
No.
So what he said, and basically what emerged from it, and I'll let you extrapolate the impact of what followed from his purpose. But he had a friend of his who was an atheist at the time. His best friend was an atheist.
Oh, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah, and so he literally wrote The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings as an allegory of Christian faith and orthodoxy in order to help bring his friend to convert into the light of the faith from the darkness of atheism.
And I presume you're referring to a man named Clive Staples Lewis.
Indeed, right? And it worked. And so he made this elaborate story in order to bring the simple story of faith to his friend, and it worked. And look at what C.S. Lewis took that forward with. I
mean, C.S. Lewis has become one of my best dead mentors. So I knew of their friendship, and I didn't realize that was his motivation for why he wrote The Fellowship of the Ring.
Among the singular motivations.
Wow, I didn't know that.
There's a couple good movies about it.
Oh, okay. I've got some more homework to do. Speaking of, there's I don't know if they have one down where you're out in Florida, but there's a monthly Tolkien Society that meets here in Kansas City, and we have a lot of fun. I'm surrounded by people who have forgotten more about his writings than I know, and that's a really good place for me to be.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you mentioned something earlier about like the impact that fathers can have on their children by their choices and things of that nature. And usually I'm kind of sharing a little, sharing a little bit about my thoughts or insight about this, you know, and I use that analogy of like wars aren't fought by childless men, but I'm also really interested in, you know, your perspective as a military man who has served and sacrificed, especially with your generation through global war and terror and the things that you guys have absolutely done to sacrifice for our country. You know, one of the things that I've been talking about and sharing with people is this kind of like unwritten sort of second half of the sentence when people say, you know, there's a price to speaking out. There's a price to telling the truth. And I always kind of put on my academic nerd hat and say, yeah, but that's a comma at the end of that, not a period. Because there's a second half of the sentence which says there's also a price that you pay when you lie. There's a price if you don't. And so, you know, when fathers have the duty to, you know, find their spine, it's in order to model that to their children so they can have it too and learn that. And, you know, when they don't, there is a lesson that is learned and modeled as well. And that is a nefarious higher price to pay. Not necessarily in worldly things, but, you know, in the soul. We have a duty to feed the souls of our children as much as we do to feed their mouths and their bellies. And when they learn that you turn your back instead of the other cheek, look the other way, that you go along with a lie, that you come up with an excuse to not stand up to a bully or to not do the right thing or to simply say the truth for no other reason than the truth matters. They learn that. And if they watch you do that, then you diminish, maybe not in their eyes, but in their mind, in their soul, in their heart, without them even realizing it. They learn you're a different kind of man. And so, like, my question, I guess, for you, like, from that military context, you guys are out there defending the country and its principles and its values in a physical sense with physical courage, but also moral courage too. So, like, how do you see that in terms of that second half of that sentence for, you know, what your kids learn if you weren't to have?
Gosh, that's so complicated for me because as I reflect on my time in, and I'm grateful to have done it, and I stand by my service, but I also cannot help but ask. Everyone says, "Oh, you defended freedom." Did I? Did I really defend freedom? Were we invaded by the hordes here on America, or did we, or was I a participant in the making sure that Raytheon still had missiles to sell? I don't have a good answer for that yet.
Yeah.
I'm wrestling through it. But that said, I do think there's something to be said for, in all vocations, whether you're a soldier or whether you're, you know, a scientist or whether you're whatever you do, of striving to do it excellently. And strive, particularly if you're a Christian, you should be striving to do it to the glory of God. If your vocation is turning riches, you should turn riches to the glory of God. If your vocation is soldiering, you should soldier to the glory of God. If you're a doctor, you should heal people to the glory of God. And you know, so that's how I thought of it. Was, am I doing the best thing I can? Am I leaving everything that I touch better than I found it? And I can confidently say most times, yes. There were a couple of jobs, no, I didn't leave it better than I found it. And it was despite my best intentions and my hard effort, but just under certain supervisors and certain cultures that there was nothing I could do. I tried, and then they would undo every bit of it right along the way. And I'd be like, why are you doing that? We don't want it that way, but it's better that way. We don't want it that way. And, you know, that was towards the end of my career. And I was happy to, at that point, be like, DD-214 is right there. So, but I do think, you know, as a soldier, I hope that I demonstrated to my kids what honorable service looks like. One of my sons has followed in those footsteps, and he's actually deployed right now. He's in the National Guard. Another son wants nothing at all to do with the military because of, you know, what he saw some of the reindeer games were like, and he wants to do other things, but he wants to do them to the glory of God. And so I'm thrilled, you know, whether they put on a uniform or not. And frankly, in this current environment, I'm more a critic of the service than I am an advocate. And I say that with heavy heart because I desire to be a cheerleader, and I hope that within my lifetime I will be able to be one again.
But see, so when I hear that, I see exactly kind of like the point we were talking about, whereby your children learn from your example, and they were inspired no matter either pathway, whether they went to serve in the military or to serve in the civilian world. They were inspired by the courage you did every day to answer that call and take that duty forward. As a man, as a father, you taught them how to do that for the glory of God by doing your very most excellent effort, no matter what you're doing. And without those kind of examples, and I know you stood up with courage to all sorts of things that we've talked about in your career. I mean, that's what I think kids want to grow up seeing, and they're so proud of their fathers when they see you do that in those very salient moments, but also like particularly just knowing that their father serves, I think gives every kid this beam of pride on the inside, knowing that their dad is that warrior, and they can take that forward as a warrior in civilian world too, because it's just as important.
Yeah, well, it certainly matters how we live. I mean, our kids are watching, and I think I love the point you brought up earlier about how wars are not fought or won by childless men, and I think it's too easy sometimes, and I don't want to say this cheaply or flippantly, because I know people, there is a reality of having to provide, and you're walking right through that, and that's what we're going to be talking about. But there's also so much truth to the how Shakespeare framed it in Julius Caesar, and I'm roughly paraphrasing here, but cowards die 1,000 deaths, whereas the brave die only once.
Yeah.
And the world watches, and your children watch, and your grandchildren will tell those tales. Like Charlie Kirk's children will remember him for being a man who stood far more than they would have remembered a man who maybe lives to 85 years old, who bent over at every time that there was a stiff breeze. And I think that's why I know why I'm drawn. I think that's why most people are drawn to these stories. That's why I love this podcast, these conversations, because don't we all in our hearts want to think that we're that person who, I'll be He-Man and I'll stand against Skeletor. Don't we all want to think we'll be that person? And I think most are not, but they still secretly, I think, want to be. So they live it vicariously.
I mean, we all want to be, but at the same time, right? Even St. Peter denied Christ 3 times.
Yeah, he sure did.
So we have that inside of us.
We do. Oh, yeah.
Like the fear lives in all of us.
Yeah.
But part of our job as men is not just in ourselves, but through, peer mentoring and fathering and, working as a community together is to help everybody get over that fear that we all are going to have inherently within us, because the day and the duty calls us for it. And, one of the things, that I've obviously had to deal with of late was I was faced with the dilemma of the president of my university, where I was a tenured professor, came to our meeting and told us how he had lied to the face of Ron DeSantis in Florida to get a $7 million grant, and he wanted us to go along with undermining and subverting the directives to get rid of and abolish DEI in our classrooms, in our university, so that he also didn't lose the minimum $69 million in federal Title IV funding from the Department of Education, plus all the other federal grants that we were receiving. So at least $76 million of fraud he was asking us to join and be co-conspirators with, in saying that we're not doing it, but making sure that we went along with his instruction to us, which was continue teaching those classes, continue doing that work, continue hiring with discriminatory processes in place that discriminate in illegal ways based upon race, ethnicity, gender, all those kind of things that the Supreme Court, Department of Justice, Office of Civil Rights have said that's illegal and wrong. So that was an ethical dilemma. What do you do with that when that's placed upon you? And I had to wrestle with that, and I ultimately decided to tell the truth and take that forward. We reported that to the governor's office. That came out by a story broken by James O'Keefe. He then interviewed the president, who lied to James's face and said, no, I didn't say that. And then, of course, James plays the tape and says, yeah, actually, you did. Then the president goes out and lies again to campus about it, denies it. Then we have to come forward again and say, no, you lied about that part too. Liars lie. And, when that happened, they offered me nearly $100,000 to hide the truth. So they randomly, I got a call from my attorney, said, I just got a call from Florida Tech, and they want to fire you, but they want to ask you to resign first if you'll take $100,000, just about, my annual salary at that time was $96,000. But you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement. You have to sign a non-disparagement clause, each of which you're due to pay $5,000 anytime you violate it. So anytime you say anything about the truth, anytime you say anything truthful that they think is disparagement, and there's a lot to say truthfully about that organization and the people that might be considered disparagement, but it's the truth. A lot of shady, unethical things going on. And I would owe them $5,000 in perpetuity forever. And they'd also required that I have to sign away my rights to sue them and promise to never, ever sue and hold them accountable for any of the wrongdoing that they know they were caught doing. And as a dad, you're like, wow, I'm going to lose the ability to provide food and health care. I have a baby and a postpartum wife. Not even within a year at that time. That's a heavy load. Like, you want to feed them. You need to take care of them. And we talked about that a few moments ago. Like, you have a duty to provide as a dad, as a father, as a husband. You need to feed them, provide a house, a roof, all those things that we feel as humans, and an extraordinary drive. I don't know what it's like for you, but for me, especially after I had my first son, I had the drive to provide as a father that was akin, if not, dare I say, more to the maternal drive to proverbially use the adrenaline to lift that car off the kid. Mm-hmm. Like, I loved being home with my children. I loved taking care of my wife, but I wanted to be back out there hunting on the hunt to provide for them. It's an extraordinary drive as a father, just like there's an extraordinary maternal drive to care and whatnot. And so that was being threatened to be taken away. And then you're like, well, $100,000. That sounds tasty. Like, that seems like a lot of money at the time, pre-tax and this and that. And
you
you're
got
like,
a whole year to figure out what you'll do next. And
yeah, just pay rent next month or mortgage next month, whatever that is, right? Like, it's alluring, but it was absolutely not alluring when I had to weigh the other side, which is sell out on the truth. So I could feed, essentially, if you can think about it, break it down to this. I could feed my child for a day or a month or a year, but they would know forever that I was a liar and a sellout. Mm. We can always find more food, but it's really, really hard to get your integrity back. Really, really hard, but for the grace of God and re-earning it. But to me, that was the bargain. And, based on what we talked about before, where I come from, the way I grew up, there is no price on the truth. And the truth is never for sale. And neither is my integrity. And I want my children to grow up knowing that. If they miss a meal or two, we'll figure that out. Like, we'll find... I'm a man. We'll find another way to get some food, but they can always bulk up later with food and protein shakes. Like they'll have time to grow. But what you can never recover from in some respects is the stunting of what those kids learn about integrity and what it means to find your spine and then to keep it and use it. Those are three different things. Most people don't know they have a spine. Then you got to find it. Then you got to keep it. Then you got to use it and hone it and strengthen it and then use it to carry the load for others who need you to have that spine too. Mm-hmm. And
it's not just there for the individual.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not, especially not as a man or as a matriarch either. Mothers carry an extraordinary load as well. So, that to me was a formative situation, and I'll give you one little anecdote about that. So my son is 4. He doesn't really know about that at the time. So you could ask, well, when you come home, let's say you sign that $100,000, like, he ain't gonna know about it. See, he's 4. No, but he may know about it when he's 14 or 24 or 34 or 44. And when I'm giving him advice as a father, he's going to come to you. You have kids. They're going to come to you one day with trouble, with a dilemma. What should I do, Dad? You're going to tell them what to do. And it's going to make a big difference potentially in how they respond to that guidance that you give them. If they think you're giving them lip service, or if they know that you're speaking from a point of conviction, you got skin in the game. They know you are speaking with the advice to do an extremely hard thing that is the right thing, because you know what it's like to pay that price. And it's not just empty lip service saying, hey, do the right thing, son. And they're like, yeah, but this is going to suck. You don't know what it's like to feel that pain. Well, yeah, I do, son. That's why I know it's the right thing to do still. And that's why you should do it too. And so, that was something I thought of at that time. And when we speak about the need to feed the soul of our children, that wars aren't fought by childless men, I mean that in the context of down the road in life. They will find out and they will learn who you are as a father about your past. None of us have perfect pasts. We've all got holes. But when you have an opportunity to make a good thing that they can have pride in and know that their father didn't cuck, that their father didn't break, that he had a spine. When they wonder, and we've been in those times when we wonder, do we have a spine? Can I do this? Am I strong enough for this thing that I'm facing? It's pretty inspiring to know that others have, but you come from a lineage that has too. Mm-hmm. And my hope is that they'll be able to draw from that and have strength, particularly if I'm not there, because I never know if I'm going to be around or not. I hope to be, but you hope to leave a legacy that's there for them to draw upon if perchance they have to face this, and they will have to face times in life without you. So that 4-year-old was driving past campus about 3 weeks ago with me, and he loved going to campus. We have botanical gardens there. We had a lot of fun. I had my science laboratory. Little kids growing up, like take them to work and we'd play around. He loved it. We called it the jungle. We're in Florida and the botanical gardens and whatnot. He's like, can we go to the jungle? I'm like, no, they don't really want me there right now. I said, Dad, it doesn't work there anymore. And he says, why? I said, well, they were not telling the truth. And you know that our rules are to tell the truth, and you know how much Dad doesn't like it when you lie. He said, yeah. And I said, well, they didn't like that I told the truth, so I don't work there anymore. Because the truth matters, and it's important. And as a 4-year-old, that message still resonates with him, because they understand that. And so later on, that's just how he's like, yeah. So he's like, and he said, well, who wasn't telling the truth? I said, the president, the person in charge. And, Dad doesn't like that, and Dad doesn't tolerate that. And he's like, yeah, of course, obviously. So, yeah.
What an amazing thing to pass on to a child. I had different analogies running through my head because I'm a hopeless romantic and I always analogize. But as you were talking, I thought, you're deepening the foundation for the kid, right? We as fathers, the decisions we make, we're either providing a more stable base or we're eroding away at that base for our kids to stand on. And we see it, when you study genealogies and generations, you'll see there are generations who cared about these things and they built stronger foundations, and then there are generations who threw it away and they left their children with less to start with. And kind of that cycle of, good men create good times create weak men create hard times create strong men. And we see it over and over again, and that's not lost on me.
No. Do you remember that story that came out in early September, right before the Charlie Kirk tragedy kind of pivoted the country? There was that story about that baseball game in Philadelphia.
Oh, I remember that well.
And it went viral, right?
I got a conversation when we're not recording. I'll tell you about that.
Yeah. So, for anybody who's not aware, the TLDR version is there's a home run that was hit to the stands. A little kid basically got it. A Karen came over in a Phillies jersey and basically hectored his dad, who got totally scared, cowered to the screaming lady, took his son's ball, gave it to her just to appease her, give in to the bully, and send her away. And they ended up, and everybody just Like, it went viral. Everybody had a lot to say and think about that. And then they interviewed the dad the next day, and he's like, well, it all worked out. Like, we got to meet the players afterwards, and you could see in that interview, if you go back, the kid's eyes are like dropping. Like, the dad's trying to justify it, and the kid's like, well, I kind of wanted the ball. And it's like, yeah, but it worked out. You got to meet all these players. But like, you can kind of see that he's learning. He still knows he's going to get roasted when he goes to school. Because, like, his kids, the other kids don't respect his father. And he probably doesn't a little bit less either. And all the sign bats from the Major League Baseball players don't matter when compared to the respect that you can keep of your child, of your integrity. And you're not on national TV cowering to the fear of a lady just yelling at you. And so, people talked about that a lot at that time, about like, that's not a good trade-off.
It's a terrible trade-off.
And that's what I was talking about. Your kid, there's a price to pay for giving in that the kid learns. Because he's like, well, I had to teach him that violence wasn't the answer. I'm like, whoa, who said anything about violence? That wasn't part of the conversation here.
No.
Like, you could solve that very non-violently.
All you had to do was say, you're not getting the ball. And if the lady persists, call security. It's very easy.
Yeah.
So I will tell you the story. I won't name names, though. I had a dear person who I love. But recently, when that happened, I made a post on my social channels, and I said, when that dad handed the ball over, he handed more than just the ball over. You catch my drift. And I had someone, and again, I love this person. This person is absolutely well-meaning. We have a disagreement on this. Challenged me on it and said, "Is that really a way?" You're referring to his parts. We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
In case there's a kid listening. And I said, yeah, I was. Yeah, you got me. Well, is that the way a Christian should be looking at this? And I was just blown away. I thought, what other way is there to look at it? Someone came and demanded that I participate in their theft. There's nothing in Scripture that says that I am absolved spiritually by participating in your theft. Now, people can make moral decisions and decide to hand something over, and that father did. Was it a moral wrong? I think it was certainly an act of cowardice, and we can debate about whether it was a moral wrong or not. I think it was certainly an ethical failure. But, this woman's coming, and she's the irate one. She's the one out of control. The father has a moment of, everyone would acknowledge weakness. Even if they tried to justify why, it's still a movement of weakness. And the response to my post on it is that the way a Christian should talk? And I'm thinking, is that the way someone should act in public?
Yeah, shouldn't Christians have courage?
Yeah. Is
that the way a martyr would have responded?
Thank you. And so this gets on a whole nother tangent of mine, and I won't go down there because we have way more cool stuff to talk about your story. But this is a tangent of mine. This sense of what I call over pietism, that is very well meaning, and does come generally from conservative, very very well meaning conservative theology, but it ironically mirrors liberal ways of thinking. That I find very extra biblical, and so I push back on that at every chance I get.
Yeah, and I want to actually commend your friend for pushing and challenging you, because that's what men do. We sharpen our swords. Iron sharpens iron.
Yeah.
And neither of us can get better without that testing and challenging. And I want to commend and welcome that from people too, right? So he learned a little bit by asking. You learned a little bit by having to come up with a good answer. And like, that's how we as men hold each other accountable and grow our not just our faith, but our courage and our strength. And so, to just kind of put an end note on that, what it made me think of when you said that was, when we mentioned, well, is that what a martyr would do? And I've been thinking a lot about the earliest Christians and the earliest martyrs when people affirmed their faith and joined and became Christian. So I'm Catholic, and I recently was a sponsor for a student of mine who became confirmed and affirmed his faith. And they focus a lot about those early Christians and that decision to affirm that, because at that time, when you said that, it was you acknowledging a death sentence. Because it was not a popular thing to do. Your life did not get easier in Christ. It got harder, but Christ gave you the courage, the shield, and the sword to bear the additional difficulties through the courage that comes from the faith of his sacrifice and salvation. So, you know, when we think about the courage of those martyrs, and this is what I wanted to bring it back to, is this, like, how do you get to that point of these junction points in life, whether it's martyrdom, an actual martyrdom, or the situation we were talking about that I recently faced at Florida Tech, telling the truth, but then also, and by the way, I should say, I turned down that offer for nearly $100,000. I walked away with nothing and lost everything. So in that respect, so like, when you come to those points in life, how are you ready to do that? And you talked earlier about this idea of like building up to things. And that's why these baseball scenarios matter. That's not a martyrdom. He's not losing his job. But those are those little degradations in your spine, in your courage, in the tools cognitively. So I'm a cognitive psychologist, cognitive neuroscientist. You know, your brain, your thought processes, you can think of it as akin to a muscle. And you're also, you know, it's like having your kid watch you do deadlifts and squats too. They're kind of learning the form. They're learning the structure, the technique, you know, so that they can mimic that and mirror that and do it too. And so that's how we oftentimes have the tools to make those formative, deep, heavy lifts of courage with a spine, is those little moments in life when we practice it.
I read a lot of Charles Spurgeon, and I love it because I talked to a lot of people about a lot of great dead authors. We've already talked about Lewis and Tolkien, and everyone listening is like, yeah, there Chase goes again. Yes, there I go again. I love those guys. But I read a lot of Spurgeon, and he framed it up in one of the recent devotionals I read of his so beautifully. He said, the trials are necessary because they are part of our ongoing sanctification. Like, we're initially saved, and God then continues refining us through the process of sanctification. And it will not be complete this side of heaven, right? It's an ongoing process, and we will not be like him until we see him. And I, for one, very much look forward to that day. But those trials are needed to continue sharpening us and pruning us, you know, as a gardener prunes the plants to bring it out in its better glory. And without the trials, we would stay stagnant. And that's why it's so important in the little things. I mean, Christ says that he who is faithful in the little things will be given more. That's why it's so important in the small things. Like for me, it was not even a question when I was in the Combined Arms Center headquarters, and my boss told me, now that I know you're a Christian, I'm ordering that you will be the lead in this directorate for all things related to transgender policy.
Oh, gosh.
That was an easy no.
Yeah.
And it was a hard no too, right? Because he put me through some stuff. But I didn't even have to think about it, right? Because this is so central to my morality. And I'd spent years saying, there is basic truth, and this, like, here are places that I don't want to say acquiesce, but I can remain at a certain level of peace with. But here are hard red lines that are no-go zones for me. Like, I'd predetermined that.
Yeah, see, I think what you're saying resonates so much because, and I think for one thing, it gives an example of why do we have to constantly, as young men and old men, constantly do hard things in our life, whether it's running marathons, lifting weights, do something hard, learn how to read a difficult book, or like whatever that difficult challenge is for you, right? Physical, mental, emotional growth, whatever. We have to be doing hard things because when we're faced with other hard things, we are now more comfortable being able to do it. Like you said, like it was an easy decision in some respects, still very difficult in others, but like I think that you were set up for that through the trajectory and the steps that you had grown through in your life and learning lessons, failure, times we've also failed at. I've I'm not a perfect saint of courage and resolve either. I've made mistakes too, and I've learned from those like epic failures at times when I've let people down or let myself down, and I'm like, wow, I'm never doing that again. And you resolve to never make that mistake again. And so I think that's why it's so important to practice doing those hard things. Cause I was kind of a weirdo in that, like, people ask the similar questions of like, well, wasn't that hard? Yeah, but this is hard. That's a hard thing to do. And to me, like, my brain didn't really register. I mean, you kind of register the difficulty, like you said, but at the other time, you also don't, because it's like asking. We're in Missouri, so a St. Louis Cardinals Mark McGwire to like, wasn't that hard to hit a home run? He's probably like, no, because he practiced it. He's so used to it. It was another day at the office. Mm-hmm. He tries. It's difficult. There are pitches that are still difficult for him to hit, but like, he's doing what he was built to do because he built the repertoire of practice that allowed him to do it with relative ease, of course. And so he doesn't overthink it when he sees a fastball down the middle. In fact, that fastball down the middle now looks like a big, juicy meatball to hit out of the park. And that's what it needs to be for us as young men, as old men, building that spine, building that courage, practicing those times so that, like, you're kind of that weirdo when people are like, isn't that hard? You're like, no, it's just the right thing. I grew up in extreme difficulty and challenge. Like, my mom was put in jail. My dad was abusing us. Like, there was all sorts of things that were going on, but you build those calluses of practice, like I kind of related, learning what's right, learning what's wrong, having a sense of a moral compass and what really matters, and also what's right and wrong, such that your hierarchy is different. People look at that as you're kind of a weirdo now because you're not chasing the worldly monies, the big fancy expensive jobs or this and that. You're actually looking at the world of what matters, helping people, helping yourself on the path to Christ, but also living the life with the values that we've been taught properly, such that when that moment comes, and we're gonna have lots of them, right? This won't be the end. I hope it's not the end. I hope I'm challenged in other ways, because life is going to get harder and bring other things afoot. We have the tools to where, you're a seasoned soldier who's gone through training, and it's just a day at the office to go take care of business. And that's how it should be.
I'm kind of curious. I found when I was in the military, I started speaking out really in 2017 when I was still on active duty with a piece that I wrote that was run in the Baltimore Sun criticizing how the Army handled the Bo Bergdahl situation. And I found out really quickly the Army doesn't like PAOs who think independently. And they pulled me into the Pentagon and tried to intimidate me. And I'll never forget, I looked at this rather pot-bellied colonel. And I said, "Sir, whatever you want to throw at me, I'll take it like a man." And I don't think he expected that because he didn't say anything more to me about it afterwards. It never came up again. And I didn't feel like I was doing anything bold or brave at that point in time. It's 20, that was 8 years ago now. At that point, I just really wanted him to shut up, frankly. And I thought, what's the quickest way out of this office? And I thought, whatever sword you want to throw at me, I'll just take it. So I'm just going to tell him, whatever you throw at me, I'm going to take it. And I've wondered since then, like, he probably didn't see that one coming, because you don't have a lot of feel great officers look at someone 2 above them and say something like that. No, it's 3 above me in terms of rank at that time. But I've had so many fellow officers say things along the lines of, "Hey, Chase, we see what you're doing and we agree with you, but you're in the world of academia." And I rather imagine there's a very similar vein there among fellow professors.
Although less of them who says they see what you're doing and agree with you. But
well, funny enough, I had a professor from a school, we'll leave it there, reach out to me once and said, "Hey, I see what you're doing and I really like it." I'm like, "Cool, come join me."
Yeah, and it's interesting, whether it's military or civilian or academia kind of domains, like, building a culture of courage, particularly like moral courage and civic courage, I think is a really big hole right now that hasn't really been fomented very well, and it needs to be fortified and backstop more. I think shows like yours are a great way to do that and build that. The Father's Heart program that you mentioned that I'm a board member of, that Matt Lindland runs out in Portland, uses combat sports to teach faith and courage and Christian values to young men to build that backstep and fortification of moral civic courage. I bet that colonel in the military culture, right? You guys are used to having physical courage ingrained and trained, but it's really not common to see a lot of moral and civic courage fostered, reinforced, because systems don't really work well with that, because it's kind of a challenge to systems. And for the longest time, up until very, very recently, when you speak out and step out to draw fire by speaking the truth about something that might not be a popular truth or a dangerous truth, usually you almost always pay an extraordinary dear price. And I'm literally living that price right now, while saving the bigger price of my integrity and my family's reputation and honor and stuff like that we talked about earlier. But like, what I'm encouraged by is there does seem to be a turn of the screw and a pivot right now. So you have guys like Stu Scheller, you have guys like Matt Lohmeyer through Stars, who were those whistleblowers, who did speak out and say those truths about the fall in Kabul and the military withdrawal in Afghanistan, or about DEI and the Space Force, and they paid the price. They were destroyed in worldly senses, but now they're essentially Senate confirmed Undersecretary of Defense for the Air Force. I mean, that is such a cultural shift to demonstrate that we value saying the truth, and we will reward people who have the civic and moral courage to set that example, so other people can be inspired to know that they can do it too. And we will make our organizations better because of that. I think we need to see more of that. And I think I'm encouraged that we're starting to see that change, and we're getting, shows like yours and other programs out there. But man, I mean, the story you related really kind of showed that, like, people don't know what to do with that, but everybody asks for it. Mm-hmm. They're somebody needs to say something or do something. And when you do, they're like, man, go you. Yeah, Chase. And you're like, I could use a little bit of help. And they're,
Well, we love it. Well, at least donate to the cause,
Yeah. I mean, and like shameless plug, I have a Give, Send, Go out. The truth is not for sale. It's on my Twitter bio at Rick Addante. Like, we ask for help because the message that we want to try to inspire people with, and not just help us, but like, they thought the truth being hidden was worth $96,000. I think it was worth $1 more than that, because I think the truth is worth more than a lie. And if we can do that, then we send a message to other people when they're faced with how many other people right now are living and working in the world under an NDA that they signed because they thought they had to. And how much truth do we not know right now about what's going on out there?
Yeah.
That are just under lock and key because people signed it off. And that's a tool that people use, and we don't know about it because it's signed off on as an NDA. So, like, if we can inspire people that, like, there is a community of support that you can get through this. And one of the things, as an aside, that I wrote in there is, like, if we never reach that, and I highly doubt that we will right now, we would do it all the same for zero. My wife is 100% on board. She's an absolute hero and a champion. And we would do it all because it's not about that money. But I think it's about the message that we can send to the people trying to buy off the truth, but the people who are going to face with wrestling as in their future situations.
Well, you mentioned the NDAs. It takes me back, going back to the whole Bo Bergdahl thing. I don't know. I'm sure you've got some familiarity with it being in Stars, but so after he disappeared, this is like what, I think it was 2009, I think, if I recall correctly, when he abandoned the base. 2011, I become the director of public affairs for that very brigade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And so I was the 425 PAO from 2011 through 14. And the very first anniversary of his disappearance, CNN is running the story, and I'm like, no one has read me in to what we eventually came to know the truth to be, that he had abandoned his post. Back then, the narrative is, oh, he fell behind on a patrol and he's a POW, and the POW part was correct. The patrol was totally made up. But so I'm like, oh, we need to like do a social media message about this and acknowledge, hey, we're still thinking, we've never forgot our guy. And immediately I get word through the aide that the brigade commander is really angry about this post and wants it down. And I'm like, what's going on? After weeks of me haranguing them, they finally pulled me into a back room, read me in, swore me to silence because it was all classified. And I really hated having to carry that knowledge, but at least I knew. And it helped me be prepared to deflect some if I needed to. But all the guys who knew what had happened had been forced to sign NDAs. And then when he was returned, what was it? I think it was I was in Georgetown at the time. It was 2018 when he was returned. And Obama had the Rose Garden ceremony where Susan Rice called him a hero, and they made this whole big to-do about, we're welcoming back our hero, blah, blah, blah. And some of the guys in his unit who had served with him, who were no longer in the Army, finally had enough and said, NDA or no NDA, like, we're done. We're not going to cover for this anymore. And they came and they spoke out. And ever since then, the Pentagon's like, we had no idea people had to sign NDAs. Like, no one can figure out who made anyone sign NDAs. It's like this.
It's their NDA.
It's a secret. No one can figure out. Oh no, we didn't direct it. Well, they didn't direct it. Someone directed it, and someone knows who directed it. But they're pretending they don't know now. Anyways, I say all that to say, those guys standing up, I'm convinced that's why the Army finally had to admit what happened and court-martial him. I'm convinced that those men not stood up and it not become a national scandal. Holy cow, he walked away from his base. Holy cow, 6 soldiers died trying to find a man who walked away from his base. Had that not elevated to the national discourse, I'm convinced the Army would have never come out and said, oh, hey, our bad. We want to announce that we allowed a lie to go out for 9 years now, and now we're going to do the right thing. No, they were forced into it. They were forced into doing the right thing because someone finally stood up and said, NDA or none, the truth is worth more.
The truth matters. And that's something that keeps coming up in a lot of the conversations I've been having with people the last few months, because there's lots of sort of flotsam and jetsam about, well, what about this? And why would you do that? And how about this? What do you think about this or that? And at the end of the day, I think it comes to that like core fundamental, truth, which is that the truth does matter. And the truth can be ugly. It can be painful. It can be hard. But like the truth should be our governing light. It leads us forward. If our room is messy and dad comes in and tells us you got a messy room, guess what? That'll help us. We'll make a clean room, and we will get better from the difficult, hard, brutal, ugly truths. We have to. Because we can't get better by the beautiful lies. We can't. It's almost a spiritual thing. And, for me, the spiritual side of it is tapped when you have guys like that in your situation who have to wrestle with that truth too. And maybe they lose a retirement, or they get in trouble, or they get, whatever the consequences are for violating that NDA, right? That they make a decision that the truth matters. And if there's a price to pay for the truth, it's still not bigger than the price paid by continuing the lie, because for some reason the truth matters. And if for no other reason, you have a framework, and whether they're spiritual or religious or not, I think having some sort of a framework that understands there's something more important than worldliness, like our money, our house, our providence in that respect, but that there's something ethical or moral or spiritual about the truth that is important to get out, to where, it's like the old original Rambo movie, like, okay, let him go. He'll be working at a gas station in a couple of weeks. You'll pick him up down the street. Like, if you understand that the worldly things don't matter, and you just gotta decelerate and take up some manual work working at a gas station or something, okay, because you have a framework that is properly aligned and not upside down. And I think that's important. The truth matters. And anybody who's been on the back end of a lie and hurt by someone not telling the truth knows that. You've been wrongfully incarcerated? Somebody told a lie? Or some prosecutor hid some exonerating evidence? You know, anything in your life, who's suffered in that respect, the truth really, 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 really matters. And in a religious level, Christ said he was the light, the truth, and the way. What is the truth? That's what the wife of Pilate asked at the Passion. The truth, Christ, it matters. It will set us free. There's a price to pay, but there will always be a bigger price if you don't bear that cross of the pain and the suffering that you may have to do so that somebody else experiences the truth. But that is what we're called to do through St. Simon of Cyrene, who bore that cross, just like Christ bore the cross for us. And that goes back to our duty as a man, duty as a father, to have that spine, to have that back, to carry that price, and to sometimes pay it, as many have paid before us, so that we have this freedom to speak the truth, which others have fought and died so that we can speak. And it's a disgrace to them and their service and their families who've paid that ultimate price if we don't speak that truth, whatever that is in your life.
Yeah, you're quite literally putting your money where your mouth is, and the job you lost over this, that I think you're going to get back. But even if you don't, the job you lost over this, we're not talking entry level. We're not talking something that anyone can walk into. You weren't validating coupons at Club Car Wash. Tenured professor at a research institution.
Yeah, 25 years of work.
That's 25 years to get to where you were at.
Yeah, tenure. I got tenured 4 years early. I got tenured in 2 years at Florida Tech. It should take 6, but it was after. At this point, it was 25 years. A lot of sacrifice. It took me 25 years to pay off my student loans. I got 3 different NIH grants to help that competitively. National Research Service Award winner, was a Rhodes Scholar finalist, made discoveries in the top journals in the world, won at the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences through my dissertation work. I was a diversity fellow of the APA, where we discovered a brainwave frequency that predicts memory before it happens. That's now been applied in all sorts of different applications, even so far as we took a follow-up study where we manipulated brainwaves non-invasively to improve human performance and memory. I've been literally, so this is funny. So the day before I got fired, the vice president of research, Hamid Rasul, and the director of research, Carolyn Locklear, they were writing grants with me, processing grants, supporting me, encouraging me, saying, yeah, you're doing a great job for an Air Force grant with a private biotech company to put these kind of technology developments. We were working on brainwave frequencies to improve cognition into the helmets of operators and pilots and astronauts. Like, biotech company found me out, came and found me, said, we want to partner with you for AFWorks, if you know AFWorks, grant, or SpaceWorks and stuff like that through the Space Force. And the school's vice provost for research was celebrating this great work and sending it to the general counsel to sign off on, who are secretly also the general counsel working to fire me. And that same vice provost, Rasul, then signed off to fire me the next day. So, like, talk about lies and the dirtiness of a lie. When you're on the back end of a lie, you learn that it kind of matters to tell the truth. So burgeoning career. I sent my students to NASA. I was a finalist for the space program. Happy to talk about that in a little bit. I lived in a space capsule at Johnson Space Center along the way, where we looked at those brain states that can be modulated through the impacts on behavioral health from long-term isolation and confinement, comparable on the ground in what we call an analog or an analogy to long-duration space flight necessary to survive a trip to Mars. In a 600 square foot container that you can't escape, build teamwork, skills, team cohesion, team dynamics, breakdowns. How do you overcome that, prevent that, mitigate that, so that we can succeed on the trip to Mars? And that would basically led to me starting this company, Space Psychology, to help bring that forward in the ways that kind of get slowed down through the government NASA process to, make sure that our astronauts and our operators in space can be primed to succeed and excel in some of the harshest conditions that we'll ever face psychologically. So I'm basically the only psychologist to have ever been on the inside of a crew for that, while also then returning as a principal investigator, where I ran a study as well on astronauts living in similar conditions at the bottom of the ocean in the NEMO mission, which is NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations. So I'm really the only psychologist with the bona fides on both sides of that coin to actually have studied it as a lead investigator, brought my students on board, brought them to Johnson Space Center. They were testing astronauts. Sometimes that, for some of those students from at that point, San Bernardino, that was the first time they've ever been on an airplane. We came from the murder capital of California to testing astronauts and going to their birthday party afterwards. And it was an amazing experience for the students and paying that forward as a leader, right? While also having the experience of being on the inside and being an operator who's done it in the flight suit and knows what it's like as a psychologist. We want to take that forward. All of that is now, when you talk about the impact of a lie, the impact of these whistleblower retaliations, the science suffers. I had students come by to the house the other day. We had a barbecue, made some s'mores. Like, their projects are dead in the water. They lost an advisor, a mentor, thesis supervisor. Science suffers, student suffers. All of these consequences in that respect that are paid by students and borne by other people as a consequence of the bad actions to terminate the truth.
Because a president wants to hang on, a university president, let me make that clear, wants to hang on to DEI.
Old Johnny Niccolo. Yeah. It was
He'd rather hang on to that than the ability of a school to actually do its mission.
Absolutely.
Definition of an activist.
Dude, I was in the meeting, so I was a witness to it. So for the first thing he did when the O'Keefe story broke is he issued a statement saying, this is not true, this is deceptively edited, this is not taken out of context, and he said it was an illegal recording. All of those things he sent to the public, the students, the alumni, the parents, the donors, faculty, all of which were lies. It wasn't an illegal recording by any stretch. In fact, the university kept a recording themselves of that meeting, and he was looking straight into a camera when he was speaking. So there was no expectation of privacy. We record those meetings every single month that we have them by Florida 501c regulations. We have to keep meetings of minutes for board meetings and everything else. So he straight up lied to everybody. He also disparaged whoever that whistleblower was. I hadn't been public at that point, by calling him a criminal to all of his colleagues. So then he lies and says that James selectively edited. I was the witness. I'm present. I know James O'Keefe represented it truthfully because, one, it's on video. You can hear his words. But that's what liars do. They lie quick. They lie fast.
And they lie repeatedly.
I mean, you're the PIO guy, right? So you know how to do crisis management. Change the like they did. First of all, it's a terrible crisis comms, because the worst thing you could do is start lying in the crisis, because you end up in a really bad spun out situation. That's exactly what happened. Because then I came forward, put myself out there, identified myself, and said, this is all a lie. This is now a cover-up of the lie. And the Board of Trustees director did it too, Kristen Dreger. She's an executive for Lockheed Martin. They all are so rabidly advocates for this DEI discrimination that they even called it equivalent to veterans preference. He says it on the video, which is that, well, how can you be against diversity? It's the same thing as giving veterans preference, which is absolutely not true, because veterans earn that as part of their service to make sure they're like that's a benefit, not something given to them by virtue of their genetic code or their melanin or their gender or something.
And he said also diversity, that you're required to have a PhD to become a tenure track professor.
Yeah. So like, and then he says he's going to compensate for any losses he takes on that by building out a program for the Space Force to use DoD funding to train the students. And again, indoctrinate them in this anti-American hate, which is what DEI and critical race theory is. And I was in the meeting. He says, I think critical race theory is important history that needs to be taught. It's not even true history. Critical race theory, literally, academically speaking, is not advocating the true history. Like that 1619 project was like,
it's complete fiction.
Yeah. So you have a president of a university advocating the teaching of lies. Like that is not where we need to be as a society.
And you mentioned to me earlier that he's also pushing that in training for Air Force cadets who are in in the school, right?
Well, yeah. So we're a school that has an Army ROTC program.
It's Army, okay.
That I was honored to be able to help volunteer and do practice mock boards for, and this and that. And they had a great program. Those students take these same classes. They're there on DoD funds. So this is part of the real revelation to me, which is I'm like, this is basically a Trojan horse creating a fundamental risk to force readiness and really sustainability for the DoD writ large if you take the Secretary of War's premise at face value, which he says it's dead at DoD. He sees it as a threat and it will not happen anymore. Well, that's great. It's an important, critical first step. Strip it down from all the PowerPoints. Great. No more PowerPoints at the Pentagon or from the Pentagon that advocate this anti-Americanism, right? That's great. But when you pay for all your leaders and people and personnel to get indoctrinated by all the civilian institutions where it's still secretly embedded, where James O'Keefe's story that I reported says we're going to strip the words down so you think we're not doing it, but we are definitely doing it. Definitely don't get caught because we don't want to end up in court. Well, guess what? Now they're in court because I'm fighting back, and we're taking the fight back to him because we're keeping our spine. So that what happens is you embed this ideology into students, RTC students or DoD students coming for continuing education or GI Bill or whatever, and they're now essentially laundered back into the military organizations with this anti-American ideology. And sometimes it's not even overt anti-American. It can be very subtle. It can be very implicit. But it's just as nefarious, if not more. Because one of the things that struck me is like, how is someone supposed to fight for America and potentially be willing to die for America and our values and our principles if they're taught to hate America and its values and its principles? And when the wolf is at our door, what does that mean if for the people who are tasked with responding?
Will you fight for a country and potentially die for it if you've been trained to hate it and to believe that it is wrong and that it is oppressive? You won't.
That's an insider threat.
Yeah.
That's a core insider threat using their language. That's a force readiness issue in my mind. And the other thing I saw is, I come from a psychology department. When we saw a great example that came out, everybody culturally saw that when Charlie Kirk was assassinated and murdered, we saw people even in the DoD, but also in academia, professors and even psychologists, their masks came off and we saw how they really feel.
Oh, it's horrible.
And awful things said about their fellow American citizens, particularly on the DoD point of view, right? These are fellow citizens and countrymen. And I love the fact that we can disagree passionately, right? That's great. That means we have freedom to iron sharpening iron. Maybe I'm so super wrong and I need you rattling my cage. Like, I'm screwed if we can't do that, right? Like,
but at the same time, you also can't have people who are sworn to defend and protect Americans cheering the political assassination of America because they don't like it.
Well, yeah, and what I saw is one step further from that is I train doctoral level psychologists, clinicians, and they're 90% of that viewpoint. They're being trained with 90% of that viewpoint from the professoriate, who are also of that viewpoint. And so what does that mean for soldiers, airmen, sailors, Marines, Coast Guards, Space Force Guardians, whatever, if when you're seeking psychological care for either grief counseling or PTSD or suicidal ideations of whatever it is that's going on in your life, or maybe that particularly salient event, and the person on the other side of that conversation lacks the maturity to handle that in a professional way because they're secretly thinking in their mind, or maybe outwardly saying to you something of the sense of like, they think you're wrong for your view. Why are you mad about a Nazi getting killed? Oh, you're distraught about that? And what if they're not saying that, but now because the mask came off and the service members saw that in some of them, now they're reluctant to go ask for help. Like the layers of issues that are embedded that people aren't thinking about, that's also a force readiness issue. That's also a Trojan horse sort of parallel of an insider threat. Like we need to make sure that we're building an America and a force for America that is aligned with America and not undermining it and subverting it. And that's exactly what I caught with James O'Keefe, was the subversion and undermining of the executive orders of the President of the United States and the governor of the state of Florida and the willful conspirators of other faculty joining with the president to say, yes, we agree with you. We will hide it, but keep doing it.
And taking other people's money to do it.
Yeah, your money, everybody's money.
Has anything happened to that president?
No, I mean, not to my knowledge. I'm not there, but we've taken the fight forward. Anthony Sabatini's firm has been leading that. We filed a wrongful termination whistleblower retaliation suit. We actually just got responded to that a few days ago from the university, who, as it turns out, I said they lied in the meeting that we caught. They lied about the meeting, and now in court they're lying to the judge and saying false things in their pleading, as people tend to do, mischaracterizing it. And I mean, it's almost like an easy picking. We're just picking it apart with the easy low-hanging fruit because liars lie.
They just can't get out of their own way.
No, because they don't want to wrestle with what it means if they admit that they're lying. Yeah. And we're gonna force that to happen, and they're trying to motion to dismiss, again, hide the lie. Why not take it forward and just have the truth? Why not go to trial? Why not have discovery? Let's air the truth. Show us that you're right. Show me that I'm wrong. Let's have a conversation of truth where evidence wins the day. I'm a scientist. Like, let's use evidence. Let's not hide it and say, let's motion to dismiss this. Because you know what's going to happen? They brought that to the governor's desk, is what the president said. The governor of Florida said, why are you so woke? Don't do this stuff. We're going to get to have depositions. We're going to have a discovery. We're going to be able to ask a lot of questions of a lot of people. And we're going to find out what really happened, because the truth will set us free. So we'll find out, but, it's been a hoot. So to your question, I mean, there was a big journey that went up to this. We had major discoveries. I've had a ton of grants, sent my students to NASA missions. So when this termination happens, there's a deep impact on that. This isn't just like go out and get another job. These jobs, the reason they offer to, it takes a year to get a job in this industry. This isn't something that you can just do around the corner. So we're not going anywhere. We're here, and to be perfectly frank, I feel like this is God's calling, and we're called to take this fight forward now and beyond just doing science. It's not a fight I was looking for. I wasn't looking to do this. I wanted to continue doing my science. I've got 5 or 6 projects of science that are now on the back burner, unfortunately, that we're not being able to communicate to, the society that helped fund it. But we're taking a different kind of truth forward, sharing that, and hopefully growing in some new directions of leadership, and hopefully get these things on track and inspire other people to tell the truth, to have a spine, and to grow their courage, and to help others do the same thing too, because the truth will set us free.
I'm glad you're doing it. We got about 3 minutes left here. Man, there's so much more I want to ask you, like what's like being an astronaut, working with O'Keefe. But I'm going to limit myself, and I'll have to ask you over dinner, and maybe I'll see you write about some more of this stuff. What would you say to someone who's on the fence about making the right call?
There's only one right call to make. And I would say do it. Do the right thing. You will feel so much better. There are challenges ahead. But like the first Christians who embraced that, they knew it meant martyrdom. It's worth it. You will feel like when we said no, or when we got that termination, we felt free, because you know what? You know the kind of places that terminate you for telling the truth? They're already toxic work environments. And
That's
it
right.
was. Like my wife, we were like, yeah, we are free from the toxicity. If they want to do that to you, it's like getting out of an abusive relationship. And it's hard sometimes. But I would say know that courage has gone before you. Know that you're not alone. Know that you can do it. Know that there are those of us. Look, I'm public on Twitter. Send me a DM. I will help you. I will give you emotional support. Like, we'll just talk. I had other whistleblowers that I knew, that O'Keefe connected me with, that gave me help to come public, and to have that faith. When my priest told me Christ was the first whistleblower, the original whistleblower. And that gave me great courage. I had great courage when I looked at the saints of those who were martyred with the courage to tell the truth that made me feel like a giant wuss for just caring about a job. Like it's so like it just changes when you look at it that way. You're like, all right, this is just worldly stuff. We will be okay. It is hard. Mm-hmm. Sometimes God calls us to do those hard things, and we learn through those sufferings, those trials and tribulations, is what I would say to them. And, and the last thing I would say too is, like, we talked about this. This is actually what started our conversation before the show started, which is that, like, we need courage, but we need people to take this forward in the realm of academia, who engages in the education of our youth, of our adults. I've been struggling. I want to know who is under 45, but a professional academic who with published, peer-reviewed, intellectual contributions, working as an intellectual, but is not 92-year-old Thomas Sowell, who is amazing and great. But, like, we need new generations of leaders.
We do.
So that's what I would say to that person is we need new generations of leaders. If you are in that situation and you are feeling called, you're that person that we need to be a leader.
And you're one of them. Where can people follow you and learn more?
Well, I'm on Twitter at Rick Addante, RickAddante. I have a Substack that can be subscribed to. That's, I think, R Addante on Substack. But on Twitter, there's a Give, Send, Go link in my bio. They can support us there as well. That's a Give, Send, Go for, it's called The Truth Is Not For Sale. We're very grateful that help. Send me, I guess, a X post or tweet or message. Love interacting with people and always happy to help. I mean, I'm a scientist and I'm on LinkedIn too, but that's kind of dorky. I'm not very active on there.
Well, man, I appreciate your stand. I'm really grateful. Our mutual friend, we'll leave him there because he doesn't like his name out in public, but I'm really grateful he connected us, man. Just reading your story, getting to meet you, I'm fired up. I'm looking forward to continuing the discussion here after the cameras finish up and we let the team go home on time for the day. But man, it's been a lot of fun. I could do it for another hour. But man, just keep charging. You're doing absolutely the right thing.
Thank you, man. It's an inspiration for me too, because I go through doldrums, and this is hard. We have challenges and struggles too. So to hear you say that encourages me. So thank you as a brother in Christ for having me here and for giving that encouragement, because it means a lot. It helps me to be stronger too. So thank you.
We do it in community. Speaking of community, there's a great community that will help you out if you're trying to get your kids on the straight and narrow in K through 12 education. HerzogFoundation.com. They're great partners in this podcast. You should totally check them out. If you'd like to know about me and my other work, you can go to ChaseSpears.com. It's a real joy to bring guys like Rick into the set here to share stories of courage and resolve, to show you this isn't just theory. You too can take a stand and do the right thing. So get to it. I'm Chase Spears. Thanks for listening.
Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'll see you next time on Finding Your Spine.